I would always just take over if nobody else did, as a sort of a reluctant leader. They told me to go ahead, and I asked if they were sure, and they said yeah, so I did. Thanks for everything we have. Thanks that we're here together. Please help us get there and back, and please help everything be okay. And if it's our time, please help us go in peace. Then someone said, or at least take a bunch of them with us. Everyone, including the people outside the semicircle who had taken close but defensive positions, all said exactly. There were some appreciative thanks and some quiet amens, and that was it, pretty low-key. With nothing to report, prayer and handoffs complete, we felt complete and piled in our trucks. And finally, we headed out with the troops that had been on guard overnight and left fresh guards for the day shift. Chapter 6. The Road. We always traveled down roads with the same strategic framework. 3 vehicles, CO sitting in a random vehicle each time, us choosing from our pool of radio channels just before we leave each time, and changing it as we stop each time. Easy to remember primaries and backups. Today was a +2, -2, which meant from the origin channel we'd go up 2 or down 2 when we needed to hop channels depending on which tactic was going on. We all had our radios on and fully charged. It didn't take much power to charge them. They stayed charged for a long time, and they didn't take much power to idle. Most of us had swapped out the stock antennas now for the long whip antennas, which had better range and were flexible, which meant we didn't get constantly poked by them. They did tend to get slammed in car doors, however, but oh well. 2 of the guys had longer rope antennas that snaked through their web gear of varying lengths. They liked those best because they didn't snag and got great reception. Some of us also had expanded-sized batteries, but it was still a hodgepodge of radio brands, but they all still worked on the same framework, which was cool. This made them all essentially function the same, and the comms officer could bulk program them super efficiently, which was nice for all of us. We each had an earbud for a radio, so we didn't cause tons of feedback or crosstalk with each other. Most of the time, we just listened to the orders being given anyway instead of talking. The CO could direct us which ways to go with code words, and the lead vehicle would know where it meant. We also virtually never left, but when we did, it was at random times in order to keep everyone out there waiting, just in case. This time our CO chose Route Alpha, only we would know what that meant because Route Alpha never even meant the same way twice. The lead car turned to take Route Alpha, and since that's where the lead car went, everybody followed. This might seem weird, but this process made it significantly more difficult for the other side or any raiders to set up ambushes. If they wanted to set up ambushes, they either had to set up tons of small ones or had to rapidly move to get to our route to get in front of us really fast. The other side never set up a roadside bomb technology because there was never an insurgency. We stayed out of their city-states, and we fought them off fairly easily when they tried to come for us, as we were prepared and organized. Lines were drawn, and there was never a big civil war that so many people were afraid of. That didn't mean that they were happy, though, which is why as soon as we held off their initial attacks, we pulled back to our strategic locations. They would still attack us or even capture us if they could. The thought of getting captured by them was horrifying. We had heard rumors of public tortures, executions, and even remote torture prison islands for people like us. I hope I never even had to see one of those places. They'd have to catch me first, and I was with my badass team, so I tried to keep the thought of capture out of my head, though a powerful incentive to stay vigilant. So with all that said, the other side weren't really the assassin type. They were more just tons of small bully groups that eventually formed into a large army of bullies due to having similar overarching agendas. Their main battle strategy was usually to just swarm you, wipe you out, and then take everything you had. Or they'd park at water supplies and kill everyone they didn't find attractive enough to keep as personal play toy prisoners. We might have bounties on our heads, though. There was never any real way to know without contact in their weird world. Virtually nobody came in and nobody came out. So, combined with all that, we didn't know. We were just super careful to hopefully never have to find out. In our rare travels, the big risk for us was more things like logs over the road, vehicles across the road, snipers on overpasses, things like that. It also wasn't beyond the bad guys to leave people injured or leave women or children out, knowing we might stop to lend aid and then try to set up an ambush that way. But thankfully no bombs, no destroyed bridges, roads, or overpasses. So we did the same. We never blew the bridges and left the infrastructure alone. We felt like that was our olive branch to them, that there was always the option to come back and work things out if they ever wanted to. It hadn't happened yet, but it was the unspoken rule. No bombs, leave infrastructure alone. That didn't rule out snipers, though, so we had our group's flags up high on our trucks like ships did in the ocean and always radioed ahead. But until rule of law ever got restored, unfortunately, everyone out here got treated as hostiles until proven otherwise. Also, the other side was notorious for leaving their wounded behind. Despite staying together in groups, they didn't much care for each other's safety. Wounding one to occupy two more didn't really work. You had to shoot to kill every single time. They liked to take prisoners, though, but we wouldn't have that. In regards to going from point A to point B, going under overpasses was the worst and took the longest. Our vehicle mechanic and sniper that liked to experiment had reinforced the front of our vehicles with 3 layers of bulletproof glass. We'd scavenged it from a bank building that had been burnt out. The glass could stop up to 308 AP rounds. Because of this, we were able to sit back in the vehicles and park our vehicles in sort of a W shape when it was time to stop. This allowed us to steer forwards and to the sides and be protected while we scanned the overpasses. The sides of our trucks were also armored, but were more meant to be used as cover and temporary armor personnel carriers than traditional tanks. The basic plan is that we would get up on an overpass, check it out, look around, check the channels, and bio-brake if we needed to. It would be just for a minute, then we would hop back in the trucks and rinse repeat. In a normal and lawful world, it would take about an hour to get to the plaza. There were roads that allowed us to avoid most of the overpasses, so there was a possible route where it took about 2 hours to get there, and the new way we had figured out that was the safest, meaning the least risk. Thankfully, in part due to our precautions, but also partially due to the general public lack of fuel, this made travel fairly safe. Maybe due to most of the troubles being contained within the major cities and bandits recognizing the branding on our vehicles, this present trip was again largely uneventful. Only at one point during one of our detour portions of the journey around an overpass did we hear some engines. We stopped, took defensive positions, and threat assessed, but no sooner heard them driving away. Our comms guy and a few others scanned the channels and reported nothing on comms. Nobody had a visual either, so we never actually saw them or heard anything from them. It is possible, though, that they were headed in the direction we were going to, based on where their engine sounds were trailing off to. We headed the final few miles to our last checkpoint with no more events of interest. As soon as we arrived, our comms guy indicated to our CO that we should be within range. We weren't using ham channels or repeaters, so we had to be in line of sight, and we were. Chapter 7. Radio Contact. So with that, he reached out to his contact for the handshake. This was always amusing for us because nobody had any idea what he was going to say. We all visually scanned the area for threats and took no laziness despite the area's familiarity. The area provided a natural comfort, and we had a clear line of view in all directions. We had strip maps and topo maps. It was well surveyed by earlier visits. One guy was out with binoculars checking other high spots. It was trying to be a clear day, but the clouds were taking over. We sat upon a heavily defensible spot higher up than everyone else around. We would be able to spot snipers easily, but they would have a hard time spotting us. High ground is good. As we scanned for potential threats, we heard the first part of the handshake come from our public outreach officer. Go through. Romeo, this is Juliet. Romeo, this is Juliet. Do you copy? There wasn't anything at first. We never knew exactly when we were going to get there, only the day was scheduled. It was pre-scheduled based on the prior visit, and only their contact and team knew. And our team knew, so it wasn't unusual for the handshake to take at least a few seconds for a response, but never more than that.